The next step after exactly where Chuck finished the installation, I think the next step is to talk about security, and that's why we try to do it one after the other. And it's you have your iDempiere in production installed. And then you need to take care about many things about security. Yeah, Chuck mentioned some VPN, firewall, but there are more components to take care about. Yeah, in this graphic, it's on the wiki. I tried to show all the components of iDempiere. Almost each box of those needs to. You need to check something about security on each of those boxes, yeah? So here we have, if we have here the, let's start with the database, Postgres, Oracle, whatever. You usually have some iDempiere configuration files, and you have external tools connecting to the database. Sometimes people open the port directly to allow connecting from LibreOffice, whatever, yeah, or from a direct Jasper connection or another Crystal reports, whatever, yeah. That has security implications, yeah. And there is here the database, and you have here the Swing client, yeah. The Swing client is very insecure, so you need to take care of that box or put a terminal server. For the Swing client. And this is iDempiere services. There are a lot of services there. Some services are there, and maybe you have not noticed the security holes that represent. Yeah. And this connect to the database. You can also check this arrow for that. And this folder, the folder of iDempiere also has some security issues there that you need to check on your production system. And here you have your clients connecting. So you have browsers and browser security issues too. And how to connect the browsers to here. You can connect them via VPN, or you can connect via a proxy web server and client certificates and etc. So I am going to talk a little about every one of those things. The iDempiere web UI, yeah. Usually, my recommendation here in the web UI is do not open the port of Tomcat Jetty to the world, yeah. That's common sense, but many people still install iDempiere and open the port, and it's very dangerous, yeah. You need to, it's recommended to use a proxy server as Apache, NGINX, whatever that, and just show the services to the world, just the services that you are going to provide, yeah. Usually, web UI. If you are going to use web services, then you open AD interface and the web store, maybe, if you are going to use web store. Usually I just open that. The iDempiere monitor and the Felix console, I always access via a tunnel or another approach. I don't open that here. Yeah, when you this server, when you start the iDempiere server, it opens all this stuff. Yeah, it opens web UI, iDempiere monitor, Felix console, web services, the new web services, and it opens some old web services, old REST web services. They are there, and mostly nobody knows. And this old REST web services, there is a call that you write in your browser, and it returns the database password. Yeah. So it's very important to close that. Web store, Fitness, if you start the fitness plugin, then it will open fitness. Yeah. The mobile, for example, other plugins that can open things, web servers. Okay. So this is the recommendation. Use a proxy web server just to open what you really need. Just open the web UI. If you're not using, if your users are just using web UI, just open that. Why open the rest? Okay? It has security issues. This is very direct. You get the database password and the database user with a simple call. Okay? Okay, on the operating system, when you are here, yeah, you install iDempiere, and there are some files. One is iDempiere env.properties. That file has the password of the database, not encrypted. It's plain password. And usually in the default installation, that file is 644 permission to read to everybody. I think Chuck's script takes care of changing that to read-only permission, yeah? So if you use that Chuck script, it's fine, but if not, you need to go and take care of that. And it's not just that file, that file is copied in utils. In utils there are also a copy of that, backup, and the backup has also the password not encrypted. So better go there and protect that file. Yeah. When you are in the here in the server as a user, okay, this can be considered another not a whole, but this I could here. I can come here and say export. I think it's like this now. Yeah. When you are importing things into iDempiere, like when you are importing a language translation file, it opens translation. It opens a folder browser like this, yeah? That can be a problem, yeah? Because when you open this, it's on the iDempiere server folder. So I can go to data and put some file there, and kind of. Yeah, and there are other windows that do the same, yeah? So as a security measure, this defaults to the server installation folder. But you can configure this sysconfig key and create a different route for the import folder, okay? And it's recommended to create a temporary folder for that. So when you open this window, you don't see the server, yeah? You see a temporary folder where you can load and okay, this is a folder. I think we also made some the 2-pack of version 2.0, I think, wrote a lot of files on the server folder. We changed that now. It almost write everything on TMP folder. Yeah. Okay. Swing, about Swing client. Yeah. We keep saying that is not safe, and there is no way to make it safe without a big architectural change. Yeah. So the recommendation we always have said in iDempiere is don't use Swing. Is a non-secure client. Yeah, it has the database password in a properties file. It's encrypted password. Yeah, but the encryption algorithm is in the jar file. Yeah, so a hacker can take the jar file, the properties, the crypt, and it has direct access to the database. And it has direct access because for Swing to work, you need to open the port for the clients. So it's very easy. Even there is a security key on the encryption of iDempiere, but this is stored on the Java code. So if you have the jar file, you have the key too. There is no way really to protect that. And so as a security recommendation, no Swing. If you definitely want to use Swing, then better use a terminal server, a Citrix, whatever, yeah? And you have more control there about what you allow the users to do. But general, better no Swing. Yeah, we have not deprecated Swing. It's still working, and we keep it working. It's not evolving. All the new stuff that you see in ZK, most of that is not on Swing. I think very few people still use Swing. Nicholas said that he used Swing for system administration, but not for user. Thomas was one of the big defenders of Swing, but you are not using Swing anymore?
Not so much.
Yeah.
I have not enough results. I still believe in it, but I think we can make ZK as good as Swing.
Yeah.
Like the shortcuts and these things.
Yep.
It's much faster than to use
Yep. It's really we have had discussions in forums about how to make it secure, and it would need a rewrite, re-architecture of how connect to the server and create users with roles and in the database. Too much work. Okay, the next thing is Jasper, and with Jasper is okay. Jasper usually are here, but it's like external tools. If you open, well, okay, there are external reporting tools, and there are the embedded Jasper. Yeah. Let's say about the embedded Jasper is that you must install Jasper reports that you trust. Yeah, as a security measure, I would not install anything that I cannot read and compile. Not a binary Jasper, because Jasper has all the access to the database. All access. I can, in a Jasper report, I can write drop table business partner, and it will drop the table business partner. Yeah, you just call the model classes or compare util dv, execute, and it will execute anything. Yeah, so in Jasper I can go and update the super user password, whatever I want to do with the database, I can do it via Jasper, a Jasper report. And okay, and the other is VPN. Yeah, more secure. Client certificates is one way, but VPN is even more safe, I think, and it encrypts everything. Another thing that I have seen in production system I have seen people using HTTP port. Yeah, not encrypting. It's very easy to. Now all the passwords travel through the air, so somebody put a sniffer and take the password. In HTTP you can read the packets, plain. The password is plain there. So another recommendation, use always the HTTPS of this proxy web server, not the HTTP. Don't use that port. Okay? And something else here, browsers. Keep your browser updated. And I think that's all on the technical side. Now you start iDempiere. I think there are some first security steps. First security steps that I recommend when you start iDempiere, your production. Maybe Chuck's script must take care of some of this, or I don't know if of all of this. But the security steps are, the first I think I do always is changing the passwords. Yeah, it's basic. I changed all the 4 default passwords: Garden admin, Garden user, super user, and system. Change them to something different. Yeah, mandatory if you are going to open that to the world. And then I used to run hash passwords. Hash passwords, you know, was contributed by Adaxa too. The hashing password. It's the most recommended because it's one-way encryption. Yeah, the password is hashed or stored in the database. But if you get access to AD user table, you cannot reverse that. Yeah, it's just one-way encryption. So it's the recommendation, use hash passwords. It breaks one feature. Yeah, when you use hash password, you cannot save the password on the login page. That's something that maybe we can develop. But at this moment, if you do hash password, you lose saving the password. But that's fine. I don't mind too much about that. And encrypt the sensitive fields. Yeah, encrypt the sensitive fields is encrypting, for example, in AD user there is a mail and the mail has a password. Yeah, in client you configure the mail in client and it has a user password. All those passwords must better you encrypt them. Yeah, with the encryption tool that iDempiere provides. Okay? And talking about that, iDempiere has an encryption key that is common to all iDempieres since Compere. To all Compere, iDempiere, iDempiere use the same encryption key. There is a class when you open Eclipse. There is a class, I don't remember exactly, is secure engine or secure.java. And the encryption key is an array of bytes there. Yeah? So it's the same for every installation of iDempiere. So if you get a database and it's encrypted, with that default, you can just decrypt it very easily, because it's the same for everybody. So another thing that sometimes I do when I am very paranoid is to change that array. Password rules, yeah? So we implemented password rules, length, number of alphabetic, alphanumeric, all that stuff, yeah? That is there, that is by default is disabled, so you need to go and configure it. Open the password rule window, set your rules, and assign it to the system client, is that. And then, I think after that, you go and change the passwords of Garden admin, Garden user, system, super user, following those rules, okay? And there are also security, is disabled by default, but is recommended. There are user locking mechanisms. We have some system configurator keys to define how many times invalid password. If you make 3 times invalid password, the user is locked. Yeah, in this system configurator keys. How many days? If the user doesn't log in 7 days, lock it. Yeah, things like that. All that is there is disabled, so you need to configure, and it's recommended to configure it. Okay. And we implemented this. This is interesting. When somebody writes a wrong password on the login window, a line is written in this file, outfailure.log. Yeah. The line written there has the IP address and the user, IP address and username. Yeah. So the idea is that we have a log of all wrong password attempts, and with some external tools, there are tools that can analyze a log file and block that IP address, for example. That tool works for SSH, deny host is one, there are several. So you can create a rule on that tool also to block an IP address that is trying passwords on our site. Okay? It is this outfailure.log is for that. What else? Role configuration. So you then need to create your tenant and configure roles. Yes? Roles. Many people I have seen don't configure role security and just prefer to create a menu and restrict the menu. Yes? And I say that's not security. That's visual. You just see a little menu, but you can zoom to the window, and even if the window is not on the menu, if you have access, you can zoom there and do whatever you want. So I don't recommend that. Yes, if you want visually to have a little menu, that's the option, but not security. Yeah? Creating a menu is not about security. It's about visual, helping the user. So for security, use the access, the role access per window, process, task, all the access, and document action access. You must know already, we created on iDempiere, it was very complex to manage roles before, and we didn't like that. So we created the master roles, that's since version 1, I think. The master roles can be created even on system. If you have a multi-tenant installation, then you create the master roles in system and you just reuse it on the tenants. Very simple, very easy to manage that now. Just configure role once, okay? And you can also, in role configuration, restrict access to tables, to the whole table for a role, or restrict access to specific columns for roles. You say this role cannot see this column, and that makes sense, for example, for, I don't know, salary, some columns. That's all about. And there are one advanced feature that I like since Compier is record access. Yeah, you can restrict the access to one record on a list. Yeah, and password to change, fields to encrypt here, and the last thing to finish is some words about advanced roles. Advanced roles, yes? When you create roles, when you create the roles, there is a flag here. This flag, yes? No, that flag, no. This flag. Access advanced, okay? This flag, I want to emphasize this, because almost in every installation I see, after we put that flag, people keep using advanced roles for the end users, yeah? And that flag is there because there are security holes in many windows, yes? In client windows, not in system windows, because system is IT, so we know, supposedly. But on tenant windows, on client windows, there are security holes, yeah? A lot of. And we decided how to close those security holes is, okay, we can have roles that are for IT guys, not for users, yes? If I say this role is advanced, it's intended for the IT guy, not for an end user. All the security holes are open for this role, yeah? So all what we consider a security hole, we sometimes just say, okay, this is advanced, and we don't care about that field anymore. But if you open the role, pues, you are opening the security hole. Security holes are in, for example, window customization. Yeah, window customization here. Windows customization is a very nice feature to customize the dictionary specifically for a tenant. Yeah, but here you can say the default of this field is select password from AD user, yeah, and the default becomes the password of super user. Okay, so it's things like that. And in this window, usually you restrict this window for user, but there are other points more complex to protect, like make template, like workflows. In the workflows, you can also create a SQL to update the super user password. Yeah. So the message is consider advanced role like this guy is super user. Is super user. You gave access to advanced role, you are giving super user password. Okay? So treat an advanced role like that. Is the recommendation. Okay? That was all. If you have any further questions.